Okay, so hopefully you have successfully installed Adobe Photoshop Elements on your computer. And today we're going to get started using Photoshop Elements for the first time. And we're going to learn how to recompose images by using the crop tool in Photoshop Elements. So when you first open Photoshop Elements, you get this kind of welcome screen, and you actually have three choices here at the bottom: photo editor, organizer, or video editor. We're always going to be in the photo editor for this course. So I'm just going to click on that, and it's going to load this program. And so when you first open the program, you're probably going to get a screen that looks something like this. And this is a screen, it's called the eLive component of Photoshop Elements. And it's designed to walk you through specific tasks. Then there's a quick mode. The quick mode is kind of a scaled back version of Elements. There's a guided version that, depending on what you want to do, it'll actually walk you through a particular task. And then there's the expert mode. And for this course, we're going to reside in the expert mode. And once we select the expert mode, the next time that we load Photoshop Elements, it should automatically come to this mode. So anyway, just to kind of show you the workspace, over here to the right, this is called our panel dock. And we're going to be doing things later in the course related to working with layers, and we'll be doing that in this part. Over here to the left, this is called our toolbar, and so we're going to be accessing various tools on our toolbar. And then up here at the top, of course, are your menus. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by going to File and Open. And we want you to navigate to wherever you saved the sample images for this particular assignment. And so I am doing that now. And here are my photos. So these are the 5 photos that you should have downloaded for this particular assignment. So I'm going to select all 5 of them at the same time and click Open. And it will actually open all 5 at the same time inside Photoshop Elements. And what you're going to notice is down at the bottom of the screen, we have what's called the photo bin. Photoshop Elements calls this the photo bin. So this is where my photos that I just opened reside. I can click on any of the photos and in the bin, and it loads the photo up here onto the screen. So the sample files that we work with each week are always going to be photos that I've taken, and I've picked some photos here that the composition may not be horrible, but it can obviously be improved. And one of the things that I try to instill in students is to never leave a photo without doing some cropping to it. Now, I will tell you, probably 5% of the time when I take a photo, I don't crop it, but that means that 95% of the time I am cropping every photo. And what cropping means is that I am removing portions of the image that I don't feel work well with the composition of it. Okay, so over here on our toolbar, we have all these various tools. And you'll notice is as I'm clicking on different tools, this section here is changing, okay? And so this is a context-sensitive area that changes related to whatever tool you're using. Well, down here on your toolbar, there's a Modify section, and the very first tool on that, this is our Crop tool. And so when we select the Crop tool, it changes down here and gives us some different options. So one of your options in this section right here, you can select a particular orientation that you want to crop to. So for instance, go ahead and select 5:7. 5:7 is a frame size. Okay, a lot of people buy frames to put their photos in, and so 5:7 is a real popular frame size. Now, I need you to understand that when we talk about 5x7, we're not saying that it can only be printed at 5x7. It's just going to maintain that ratio of, for 5 units of width, it'll be 7 units tall, or for 7 units of width, it'll be 5 units tall. And so what you'll notice immediately when I selected 5x7, and yours might have said 7x5, which is fine, and probably it did when you first chose it. So when you select it, what it does is it creates this boundary box for our image. And the first things you'll notice is, look at these grid lines. Do you remember when we were looking at our rules of composition in the video, we talked about the rule of thirds? And so what this is doing, whenever we're cropping in Photoshop Elements, it automatically puts those lines on there to help us with our composition, to get better composition. So what I want you to notice is, whenever you select an orientation down here, you have the width and the height, and you have these arrows going back and forth here. So with the width being larger than the height, we call this a landscape orientation. If I hit these two double arrows, you'll notice it switches to the width being smaller than the height, and now I have what's called a portrait orientation. So one of the things that you can do when you're recomposing is just look at the difference between portrait and landscape orientation and deciding which one appeals to you. So in this case, again, I have this bounding box, and what you'll notice is it grays out the area that we're going to eliminate. And what I can do is I can just move this around. And so if I'm trying to get a rule of thirds here, what I might do is put my photographer here that I took the picture of on my rule of third line. And where these are intersecting is just right in the middle of his face. And so if I like that, that's fine. I can hit the checkbox, and I've recomposed this image. Okay. Now, if you want to, go to your window menu and select history, and have that over to the side here. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to change between your before and after. History shows you everything that you've done to this image as you worked on it. So what we have in our history list is open and crop. So if I click on open, this was the image before I cropped it. Remember, it's the amateur version. I put the subject matter right in the middle. I got too much headroom going on here. So this, if I go back and click on crop, this is what we did after. And that's a much better version. But let's say I want to try something else with this. So I click on open in my history, go back to how it was originally. And maybe I want to try this as a portrait orientation. So I'm changing it to back to 5x7. Now you notice it doesn't automatically put the grid lines on this time because we've already done that once. But you'll notice I have a crosshair up here. And one of the things that you can do with the crop tool is you can actually click and drag. And because I have this 5x7 selected, it's keeping that ratio. And I can actually click and drag, and now it puts my grid lines on there. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of recompose like this in a portrait orientation. Again, using my rule of third lines, kind of keeping the center of him on this third line, and then clicking on the check mark, and there's another crop version of it. So let's go ahead and save this. So once you are satisfied with your recomposition, you can do file and save, and it will save over the original file. Or what I encourage you to get used to doing is doing a save as and giving it a new name. So this was Recomp 1. I'm going to change it to Recomp 1-1. And that'll be a copy there. And then when you get this dialog box with the JPEG options, what JPEG is it's a compressed file format. We'll talk about that a lot during week 3 of the course. But JPEG compression allows you to make your image files smaller file sizes so they don't take up as much space. So a quality of 12 is actually the maximum, and it's almost where it's not compressing it at all. And you'll see that that creates a 3.3 megabyte image for this particular crop. What I recommend you do is change from 12 to 10. And you'll notice that that reduces this almost to a third of its size, but you're not going to see any noticeable difference in quality. So I recommend you set this at 10, click OK, and now it's saved. Okay, so we want to get to our next image. What I do now is go down here to the bottom and click on, and it pulls back up my images. And so I'm going to go to my second image now, and let's see what we can do with this. So again, I got my crop tool, but again, because I went to the photo bin, I've lost my tools. So I click here on Tool Options, and that brings back the crop options. So one of the things that you can do, again, for this particular image, it's in landscape orientation. And I like the landscape orientation for this particular one. What I don't like is she's pretty close to right in the middle, and I just want to recompose this a little and make it look a little bit better. So I'm going to switch I'm going to click on these double areas to switch so it's landscape. And another thing the tool does is it has like these crop suggestions. And I kind of like those. Click on one of those as a starting place, and it puts the lines here. And again, what we do is we go to one of these anchor points, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this down a little bit, and then what I'm going to do is click on it and drag it to the right. So I'm putting her right on that rule of third line, and that is looking pretty stellar right there. I really like that. One of the things you want to be careful with when you are cropping is, you notice how we can see all of her hand here. A danger when you're cropping is that you clip off like fingers like that. That's not good, okay? That appears to be sloppy, or it just feels wrong to have just fingers cropped off. So if you're going to have to crop off fingers, go ahead and crop off more, and go ahead and crop off the entire hand. You don't want to crop off just fingers. But in this case, I think we can keep the entire hand. And again, I like she's centered right on that line. You've got this light in the background that's centered on this other rule of third line. On this bottom rule of third line, notice how it's cutting right here where the road is meeting the steps there. That's a really good look. I'm going to click my check mark, and that's my after composition. Again, I have my history panel open, so I can go over here and click on open. This is what the image looked like originally, and here's what it looks like after the crop. Just a nicer composition. It's not a huge change, but it is an aesthetically pleasing change. Again, I'm going to do File and Save As, and we'll do 2.2-1. And again, I'm going to change the quality to 10 and save that. Okay, so I'm going back to my photo bin. Let's click on this third image, see what we have here. Okay, so again, I'm going to click on my tool options so I can bring up my crop tool. And again, I'm going to select one of these as a starting point, one of these crop suggestions. And one of the things I want you to notice here is the horizon line is a little crooked, isn't it? Okay, remember that feels a little off. So what we want to do is we want to straighten this image so that the horizon line isn't crooked. To do that, with your crop grid up, if you go to one of these corners and go outside of it, notice how my pointer changed to that curved double arrow. That allows me to rotate. And so what I'm going to do is rotate this so that I have a line. And when you're rotating, it actually puts on more grid lines to help you really straighten things out. So I'm straightening out the horizon line. Okay, so now it just looks like my box is curved. But then I can position this where I want it. And I'm actually going to crop this in a little bit more. So I'm going to one of the corners, getting right on it and dragging it in a little bit more. And so in this case, I've got this row of pelicans back here on this rule of third line. I got this guy at the intersection of this rule of third line. I've straightened this up, so if I click my check mark, it straightens that horizon line and gives me a much better composition. So once again, here's my open. That's what it was originally, and here's my crop. Remember, one of our rules was to fill the frame, and so I got rid of a lot of extraneous information there, and we're just focusing on what we're really interested in. Okay, so again, you're going to want to save that. I'm going to go ahead and go to the tool bin and go to my third. Okay, so for this one, this really is not too bad of a composition, just like it is. But one of the things that I want you to think about as you're cropping or have the access to cropping is that you can get really creative as you're recomposing an image. So if this per se was a client and I was showing her this photo and saying, here's an option for you, what I might do at the same time is to recrop this and give her a second option. So for this one, I want a portrait orientation, so I'm going to click on this double arrow, and we'll start with this one, this crop suggestion. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in pretty tight to her, so I'm going to really reduce this area and come and zoom in pretty tight. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this a little bit so she looks a little tilted inside the frame. Okay, so I'm putting like the center of her face over here on this rule of third line, clicking my check mark, and boom, that's just another option. It's not necessarily a better composition, but it's another option. So if I do a save as now, when she comes in, I can show her this image, and I can show her this image, and they're two different images now that she has to choose from. Okay, so let's go back to our photo bin, and let's go to our final image. And here's a case where we have this building put right in the middle. Okay, again, amateur composition. So what can I do with this to give it a little bit better look? So what I'm going to do in this case, pull up my tool options. I'm going to go to a I think from a landscape, I want to go to a portrait orientation. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the main spire of this tower on my rule of third line. And let's enlarge this a little bit, get a little bit more of it in there. But again, put that right on my rule of third line, hit my check mark, and boom. Now, look right here, this guy right here. We're seeing just a little bit of this bird flying into the scene. Next week we'll see how we can easily just remove that. But in this case, what I could do is just recrop this slightly, and actually I'm going to do this and just move this over ever so slightly, and then hit my check mark, and now that little bird is gone. I'm going to save this, and I'm done. So that's it. That's what we're doing in Photoshop Elements for this week. It's a real simple fix. Next week we're going to dive in and learn quite a bit more about Elements. But this week, as we were thinking about just composition, I wanted to show you how to recompose in Elements. So I hope as you take your photos this week, when you're out there and you're taking photos, that you will go ahead and bring them into Photoshop Elements and recrop them. You also have an assignment where I'm giving you 5 additional images that I want you to put your spin on, your recomposition, however you want to recompose them, and you'll submit those to our Share Google folder.